Welcome to Films and Stuff with your hosts, Pete Mitchell and Ethan Hunt.
All right, Pete, Films and Stuff. This is, may I say, a bittersweet episode because we are talking about the series finale of Better Call Saul and the season or series question mark of Westworld. It's like two old friends moving away, right? Waving to them and looking at them in the rearview mirror.
Yeah. It's been a tough couple of weeks, right? We lost For All Mankind for the season last week.
Yeah.
We lost Better Call Saul forever this week.
Forever.
We don't know what's happening with Westworld because, of course, we don't. That's such a typical Westworld thing to do.
Who do you want to start with?
Let's start with Better Call Saul. It's a definitive end.
In terms of series finales, I think this was one of the most highly anticipated ones, right?
And more importantly, one of the better executed ones.
Yeah. I mean, actually, when I think of like series finale, I think of Sopranos. I think of Breaking Bad.
Yep. Mad Men.
Right? It takes a lot to really have an anticipated series finale because usually what happens is something just isn't renewed or people just kind of like lose interest, or it's like Black Hat where it just goes on forever, right? Or it's something like let's say Stranger Things on Netflix, right? And they just released the whole season, the season is ended, right? But Better Call Saul was ostensibly television week by week. Yeah. Dripping episodes to you, so you saw slowly the end coming. 6 seasons. It's amazing. I made it 6 seasons, huh?
Yeah.
Beloved
6 seasons on a premise that nobody thought they wanted.
Yeah.
On a character that they liked, but they were just like, does he justify having its own spinoff?
Let's start at the end first. What did you think of the finale? Did it meet your expectations? Did you leave with the right feeling in the bottom of your stomach?
It was bittersweet. Because on the plus side, he doesn't get away with anything. You don't have an ending which leaves the quote
justice was served.
Bad guy win. Right?
Justice
Even though
was
he's
served.
Yeah. So justice is served. Mm-hmm. So you like to see that. It seems like a fair ending.
Yeah.
It was tragic, but only because it was also the right thing for him to do. The way he did it was the right way to do it. Because he was definitely going to jail. But instead of 7 years, which he negotiates down to 7 years phenomenally well. Like that, that's such a Saul thing to do. That's such a Saul Goodman thing to do, which was to say, hey, look, I've got all the dirt. I can do everything. I can bring you down to 7 years. He does that. He even negotiates the cushy jail that he's going to get into.
Yep. Wing D. And the ice cream.
And the only reason he doesn't finally go for all of that is because, ostensibly, he loves Kim Wexler. And that's what made the whole thing okay for me. It's because all of a sudden you're just like, oh, maybe this isn't really a legal drama. Maybe this was just really a 6-season-long convoluted love story. He saves her. And he sacrifices his own, he sacrifices 79 years more of his life so that he can save her.
Did he save her?
He does, right? He says that she was nothing. It was all him, and it kind of gets the target off his back. He's like, all the things that happened to Howard Hamlin get onto his back and off of her, so the DA won't prosecute her, or most likely won't prosecute her.
See, if you say he saved her, I agree with this caveat. He saved her emotionally. I think that what he did was really important for Kim's, self-hatred.
Well-being, yeah.
Yes, I think it was important for her. In terms of legally, I mean, that's a whole different conversation, but
totally.
I don't think it changes what the DA may or may not do. And I don't think it changes what Howard Hamlin's widow may or may not do. So Kim may end up in the same place, criminally or civilly. But I agree that I think what Jimmy did was he tried to finally ease the guilt that Kim was feeling, and probably also kind of apologized to her, which I think was important, the way that their relationship ended. So I think it was really a stand-up move by him.
It really was. It was a stand-up move by a guy who's not known for being a stand-up guy.
At all.
Which is why it goes to show you that I think at the end of the day, he really does love her. It wasn't a facade. It wasn't them trying to protect each other in terms of legal liability. Mm-hmm. I think it was just saying to him, I love you. And I will do whatever I can to not just absolve you emotionally from what happened to Howard, but also legally. And I think you're absolutely right. And I'm not saying that they would or wouldn't do this, but I'm just, in a show like this, I think the implication was that she gets away with it in terms of legal liability when you see her visit him in that jail. Yeah,
I mean, I think that's the assumption that we're supposed to make. And it is a show. We don't really know.
And I think that's the assumption I'm going to make regardless, right? Because especially now we know that it's the ending. We know that while this isn't going to... While in Vince Gilligan's world, nobody gets a happy ending, this is as close to a happy ending as we're going to get.
So if you had to imagine what Kim is going to do now, do you think it's accurate that she's going to kind of quit her job at the sprinkler company? She's going to either be a public defender or work at a legal clinic, maybe in Florida or somewhere. And she's going to kind of give up this dude that she's dating, and she's just going to live this very solitary, almost self-penal...
pious life kind of thing.
Yeah, very pious life, huh? But at least she won't have this guilt. She's just going to say, hey, I'm doing my thing. I don't have time for romance. I don't have time for relationships. I don't have time for baseball games and fun. I'm going to help people, and I don't have this guilt, but at least I'm going to dedicate myself to doing something good. Can we project that's her life now?
Yeah. So at the end of that episode, I think this was 2 episodes ago before he gets caught. I remember before that episode aired, I sent you a message and I said, I secretly hoped that Jimmy and Kim would get back together. Mm-hmm. This ending doesn't allow that to happen, but at the same time does, emotionally at least. Maybe they're not back together as a couple, but at least, that opening shot, that closing shot, or those last 2 closing shots where they're sharing a cigarette together, just like they did all the way back in episode 1 of season 1.
Yes.
And then the way he kind of waves at her as she's leaving.
Yeah.
And she doesn't have a look of disdain on her face. Oh man, it was really bittersweet, and it really made my heart swell up. I felt hope for the 2 of them, if that makes sense. Even though obviously there isn't. I felt hopeful for the 2 of them.
Do you think this was one of the better series finales?
Of all time? 100%. Yeah. I think, say what you will about Vince Gilligan's slow pace. Mm-hmm. He, I think, probably has 2 of, I don't want to say 5, because I really have to think about it, but he definitely has 2 of the top 10 best series endings of all time.
Yeah. For me, this is the second. For me, nothing can top The Americans. And if anyone's ever heard me rant about The Americans, you know how much I think The Americans with Kerry Russell was the best series finale ever. I really don't think it can be topped. I hope it can. I hope I'm there to watch it, but I don't think that can be topped. I would say Better Call Saul is probably number 2. Way better than Sopranos. Better than any sitcom like Seinfeld or Cheers or MASH or anything that's, previously was such a big deal.
Oh man,
Breaking Bad
ending, though, was pretty brilliant.
Breaking Bad for me was an ending, but it didn't really give a lot of closure. Yeah, emotional closure. It wrapped up all the loose ends. It was very dutiful. It said, okay, these are the open issues. We got to close them all. But it didn't give me any emotional closure. I thought Better Call Saul gave me emotional closure, you know?
I think this was certainly better than Breaking Bad's ending, but I still rank Breaking Bad's ending as one of the better ones.
Yeah.
I really do, just because it was comeuppance for everyone. And I don't want to talk about El Camino. I don't think that was a necessary or a necessity in any way, shape, or form. I think that was just them trying to throw Aaron Paul and Jesse Plemons a little bit more work. But I didn't think it was necessary. Mad Men's ending, very good, but maybe not the best.
Can you remind me of the Mad Men ending?
Yeah, so Mad Men's ending ends with the montage of what each of the main players are doing. And the last scene is where we see Don Draper in that hippie commune in California, where he finally gets that, ray of light in his mind where he thinks of the Coke ad. Where they're all singing, they do like a musical interlude, and he starts thinking about how the classic Coke ad from
I'd like to make
80s.
the world a sing. Yeah,
exactly.
Oh yeah, that's good. Yeah, we should refresh ourselves on some of the other ones, but I think for me, when I was growing up, Sopranos was the big series finale that everyone was looking forward to. Right? That was on. I mean, we didn't mention Game of Thrones. We probably need to throw that in there, but Sopranos, was HBO's big show at the time.
That's right.
And I recall that being something that made everybody unhappy. Like no one was satisfied with that.
It was this drama. It was the drama version of the Seinfeld ending.
Yes.
Which was very inconclusive, too many doors open, and very anticlimactic.
Yeah. And I do now, we should have mentioned Game of Thrones, but I think the reason we don't say Game of Thrones is that whole last season of Game of Thrones was just this cock up of
train wreck, really.
It's basically like, hey, it's like kids like wanting to finish their homework and get out for recess. Everyone's just rushing through it and throwing whatever the crap they had on the teacher's desk and bolting without any regard for whether it was done right or done properly. I mean, it was just so disappointing that after years, did we watch 7 years and the finale was year 8, right?
That's right.
I mean,
and they split it into 2 half seasons, 8A and 8B.
Living on every event for like 7 years, then you just got this rush job year 8. I think we're all so unhappy with it that it was like, it wasn't even like a series finale, because well before the last episode, I think a bunch of people kind of threw in the towel and said, okay, fine, we know how it's going to end. Like they've just been messing this whole thing up. Like we lost our investment already, But
which is a shame. It's a real shame.
Super shame.
I don't want to blame anyone. You never know what the inside story is.
No, let's blame.
Well, okay, so, rumors were that the writers, Benioff and Weiss, had been given the keys to the Star Wars kingdom. They were given a trilogy to write. Yeah. And so they were kind of like, all right, let's just wash our hands of Game of Thrones so that we can go and write the Star Wars movies that we'd much rather do. And then you can kind of see how they rushed it, right? Like everything that happened in season 7, all the emotional work and foundation that was laid through seasons 1 through 7, and especially in season 7, was kind of destroyed in 8 episodes of season 8 or whatever it was.
That's exactly right. Sometimes we break down how things should have happened, but that's absolutely right. That's the inspiration behind a season finale or a series finale, which is all the character goodwill and all those emotions that have been built up somehow need to be tied up into a conclusion in that last episode. And every character needs to be underscored a little bit in terms of what you think of them, right? They need to leave kind of a legacy behind. And Game of Thrones did not leave any legacy behind. Contrasted with Better Call Saul, Jimmy clearly left a legacy. Kim left a legacy. Like their characters, I think were really highlighted in that last episode that we got to see who they were through all the 6 years that we've been living through them, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. What Vince Gilligan has done successfully is he's shown emotional payoff.
Yeah.
And every single one of these characters has none of them have done anything out of character to them. Mm-hmm. And it's not even the deepest stuff. Some of the most simple things all through the last episode, you see Saul asking everyone, if you had a time machine, what would you do? Yeah. If you could go back or forward, what would you do and why? Mm-hmm. And he's talking about, I would go and invest in this and make money. Everything to do with money. And then you see why he asked that question. It's because his brother was reading the time machine.
Yeah.
And it was that one day, that was the day you think, and then you're thinking back, it's like, Chuck wanted to have a sincere conversation with Jimmy. Jimmy brushes him off because they've been butting heads. But Chuck, he was like, listen, let's just talk as brothers. Let me lay out the olive branch. I realize I've been a douchebag to you my whole life. Let me try to broker peace. And had Jimmy accepted that olive branch on that night, maybe things would have changed, right? And I think that's why we see that one scene where we see him reading H.G. Wells' Time Machine. It's such a subtle scene, and it was done so well. It was done incredibly well. Oh my God. It's the smallest of things, It's kind of like the MCU's version of paybacks and, callbacks. And he's done it so well. I mean, kudos to him. He did such a good job with this.
Are we supposed to feel sympathy for Jimmy or not?
Sympathy for Jimmy, not for Saul. Because remember at that last courtroom scene, he was like, she says, Mr. Goodman, she says, no. I'm no longer Saul Goodman. My name is Jimmy McGill.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. In this last episode, he sheds himself of Saul Goodman. He just calls himself Jimmy McGill. And I think that was him saying, I don't want to be that guy anymore.
Yeah. Let me lay something out. Just a different scenario I have in my head, and you tell me how this would resonate with you. Yeah?
Okay.
On Jimmy's way to this maximum security prison, right? You see like all the inmates kind of recognize him and start chanting his name. Let's say, for example, and Vince Gilligan, I think, could pull this off, where you could see like the inmates starting to be like, hey, you screwed me over, you screwed my uncle over, or, they start to like blame him, or someone starts to like, they become aggressive towards him, right? And then you could see like the zoom out scene where like there's kind of like some fisticuffs or like fighting or rioting on the bus, right? Kim shows up and says, hey, I'm here to see Jimmy McGill. They're like, Jimmy McGill
didn't make it or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. You could, I'm trying to think of the correct wording, but they'd essentially say like, he's deceased, like he passed away and she's just like crushed. How would that ending play out with you? That Jimmy's essentially beaten. I mean, you can't show it brutally, but knowing Vince Gilligan, you would just see like the bus kind of like rocking, and you'd see like through the window, like one of the guards like with his stick trying to like break something up, right? So just say that you'd see that Jimmy was beaten to death, and then you see Kim trying to make amends, and she finds out that Jimmy passes. Would you just be like a puddle of tears after that? Or would you be like, nah, not
I would
necessary?
actually be upset with that. I wouldn't have liked that.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I wouldn't have liked that because it would have, not that the show isn't afraid of being brutal, right? We've seen that with the Salamancas. We've seen that with the Mexican cartel. We've even seen that in the Breaking Bad universe, in the Breaking Bad side of the story. It's not that. It's just his death would not have been earned for that, especially because he was known as the guy who fought for criminals. He was a criminal lawyer and, well, a lawyer for criminals, right, as well.
Yeah.
So I just think that it wouldn't make sense to me that these guys would beat him up. What I think would be interesting, and this is where I think would have maybe been a little bit more, it would have undone a little bit of the work in that courtroom scene, but it would somehow still have been a very Jimmy thing to do, is if after she leaves the jail, you see him kind of hold court, and he is kind of like the king of the prison. Everyone kind of reveres him because he's the guy who helped so many of their compatriots on the outside. So he kind of becomes like the mob boss inside. And then you see a little smirk at the end of it. And then you're just like, oh, this was all a show. He never turned back into Jimmy McGill. He's still Saul Goodman. He's just now Saul Goodman in jail. That, again, it would have kind of diminished a little bit of that courtroom scene. It would have diminished a lot of that emotional, hard-hittingness of the Kim and Jimmy reunion in the cell earlier. But that would have also kind of been in keeping with Saul, which is, how do I preserve myself above all else?
That's not bad. What about this scenario? What if after Kim leaves, Jimmy hangs himself? Too graphic?
A, too graphic, and B, that's not his personality. Again, he's the type of guy who he's the rat that deserts the sinking ship, right? Anything he can do to save himself.
The cockroach.
No matter what happens, he's quite confident that he can save his own skin.
So do you think he still becomes kind of that kingmaker? I mean, I don't know if he's going to be like the mob boss in the prison, but I could see him like having
the consigliere to the mob boss then.
Like a little bit of like immunity, right?
Yeah,
and everyone's coming to him like, hey, how can I get more meds, or how can I do this? And he's always helping people kind of game the system, right?
Exactly. And again, I don't like that as much as I like this ending, but in keeping with Saul Goodman's personality, that makes sense.
So do you think again, this is like the beauty of fiction, but do you think he just dies of old age in that prison?
Yeah. I don't think he comes out of it. I don't think he gets good behavior. I don't think anything like that happens.
You think Kim ever visits him again?
Yes. I'd like to think so, but, I don't know. Honestly, I hope so, but, she's living in Florida now. He's in jail in New Mexico. What's going to happen? We don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I would kind of expect him to not like give up. He doesn't seem like the guy who's going to be like, okay, fine. Like, I know that Jimmy can live very simple and he can find like pleasures in little things. So in some ways, jail isn't like, I feel like so terrible for him. But I also feel like he's the guy who says, hey, like no one can unravel a criminal enterprise like me. Let me be kind of like a criminal informant. Let me work outside for you. Let me and he strikes some deal to kind of get out and be on like this persistent probation. But, he's responsible to, assist kind of the FBI, and like all these different or the DEA in some type of investigations, I could kind of believe something like that would happen,
Mm-hmm. That's also another beauty of this ending, is that we can speculate as to what happens to him in jail or what happens to Kim out of jail. There are so many different possibilities that it leaves us to say, hey, what's the ending that makes you feel the happiest? Believe that. Or what's the, whatever outcome is what makes you feel happiest. Which is why for me, again, because I've always liked, I've got a thing for Kim Wexler. I think she was one of the best characters. I love Kim. I think she was one of the best. And I think she did a fantastic job, not just as an actor, but also as a director. So I was very happy with her. I was super pumped to see her. And so, because I thought that we were done with Kim, but I was so glad they brought her back. Mm-hmm. And I instantly had a dislike for the guy that she's seeing in Florida, because I was like, damn it, you're supposed to be with Jimmy and nobody else. But I was just so happy with them.
I like that they broke up. I have to say, like, the one thing I think Kim said it when she left, which is, it's not about whether we love each other. It's whether we're good for each other.
Exactly.
And she's like, we're not actually good for each other, and that was,
you're right. And that's what I'm saying, is that it's a little bittersweet. Yeah. It's a little bittersweet because they were both at their best and somehow at their worst when they were together.
All right. That's Better Call Saul.
let's quickly pivot to another series or season ending. And I think you
Yeah.
probably have more to say about this because you're the one who introduced me to the show. What did you think of the season 5 ending of Westworld? Season 4? Whatever.
So season 4.
Yeah.
And before I even get to the last episode, I have to say, I thought season 1 and kind of even season 2 of Westworld were just the most fantastic television. They really, really blew my mind. And if it's possible that this makes sense, they created something that I feel I always kind of understood, and they just made it into like art. Like, I love the idea that they projected what the future would be like in terms of this seamless integration between humans and kind of like bionic beings and all the different kind of like moral implications that would create. I absolutely believe that there will exist something like this someday. It was fascinating to me. I loved everything about it. Season 3, I felt, was a little bit berserk. There were elements of it that I really, really liked. But overall, I thought it just kind of went away from what I liked most about Westworld, and it went into this bigger kind of data collection, human manipulation type thing that wasn't really my bag. Then when season 4 came, I was hoping they could straighten it out. And they did in a way, but I'm still a little bit disappointed by the conflict. I love the idea that essentially the hosts now take over, I guess, the world, not just New York or not just America. They take over the world, and it's the humans who are, either working for the hosts or are being manipulated or are on the defensive trying to fight, right? This is a very kind of Terminator-ish storyline. I like this, but I feel like they never really embrace this. Let's have the war. Let's have an all-out human-host war. But I felt like they didn't really allow it to reach that peak. And instead, it just turned to this really kind of vague, fuzzy, what's reality? I just had a hard time really getting behind what was the conflict in season 4. And then the way that it ended, I thought was even kind of like more unfulfilling to me, Either Dolores is going to try to take over the world or not. I just didn't see any in between. And I know that the ending, maybe it's supposed to provide resolution, maybe it's not, but I didn't find it was fulfilling at all. It didn't answer all the questions, but it didn't really like leave any mysteries either. It just kind of like, I don't know. It didn't get me there. What do you think?
I think you're right. I think the way they structured the ending of this season, so let me work backwards, is that I think the showrunners weren't given the definitive answer to, is there going to be a season 5 or not? Or are we canceled? And as such, they were not hamstrung, but they were forced to write and produce an ending that could serve as either a very middling series finale.
It can be either a bridge or an ending, right?
Exactly. It can either be a very middling series finale and ending for the series, or it could be a very intriguing season finale and we see what happens in season 5.
Yeah.
It also, like other episodes or like other seasons of Westworld, I will say requires dedicated watching in the sense that I found that even in the earlier 3 seasons, it wasn't really until the 4th or maybe 5th episode where I finally understood the arc of the season and what was going on. This season seemed to be a little bit more confusing on that basis because there were also a couple of time jumps within.
Yeah.
Then there was a question of who's controlling what. And then there was the question of, are we in the real world or are we in that simulated world that Bernard had created at the end of season 2? So there were a lot of questions as to who's quote unquote real, who's not. Are there any humans left alive in the rest of the world or not? You know, what is the situation we're currently in? And if every host is dead and now they're in the virtual reality, are there any humans in the real world? What's going on with the real world? We don't know. There's a lot of what's going on questions.
You know, but this is a problem to me because entertainment at its core, right, is about telling a story that people are emotionally invested in. It can be a complicated story or a simple story, but at least you have to have a story that people care about and they're interested in what's going to happen next or the outcome, right?
Absolutely.
And my problem, as Westworld has worn on, is that what are we invested in? Are we really cheering for the humans? I mean, which human are we really liking?
Yeah,
are there any humans left? Like, are there any like human relationships that we're really excited about, right? Like, for exactly, his name's not Jesse, but what's this dude's name? Aaron.
Aaron Paul, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, are we, first of all, he's not a human anymore.
No.
Are we really excited for him to be reunited with his daughter? I don't even feel like that's a strong familiar relationship. The daughter's much older. Aaron Paul is not the real Aaron Paul anymore. What am I as a viewer intended to cheer for or be emotionally interested in? Maeve being brought back? No. Maeve being reunited with her daughter? No. Dolores and the cowboy dude? What's his name?
James Marsden?
No. Like, tell me the one thing that I'm really supposed to care about, be emotionally interested in, for good or for bad, positive or negative outcome. I don't think you can name it. There's no conflict left. It's a story for sure, but I'm not sure what side I'm supposed to be on. Am I supposed to be anti-Dolores, pro-Dolores? I just don't see. They're the same person, right?
I think this show kind of took itself too seriously and has written itself into a corner now.
It's definitely created these existential questions. What is real? What is self-determination? What is choice? What is your reality? These are very, very good philosophical questions. And early on, you know, when we had a clear delineation between human and host, these were absolutely provocative questions.
Very profound as well. The impact was very profound.
Now I just don't feel like there's any emotional investment. You know, I don't know what side I'm on. And if I'm not on a side, if I'm not cheering for any person or character or relationship or outcome, by definition, I'm not sure if this is really entertainment any longer. It's more their own kind of philosophy lecture or treatise, you know? And that's not to diminish. It sounds like it's diminishing the show, and maybe it is diminishing the show, but like the first 2 seasons were exceptional. You've got a great idea for a conflict, for storyline, for relationships. Continue on that. But I found that season 4, there was just no one to cheer for or against. There was just no one left.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. I'm 100% with you. It was just, can I also just say as an aside, minor plot hole, but how is it possible that we've created these massive technologies that you can create basically human being like bionic robots, but we can't detect if one of them is real or if one of them is human? Like what? You can't wave like a metal detector or something in front of one? How does this work?
Well, you know, that's a very, Pete, I'm so happy to have you on board today. That's exactly a very good point, which is even how they die is a little bit strange. You know, like they're robots, right? At their core, they're robots. When they were hosts, I agreed that there was some like fleshy typed skin covering to make them look real. There may have been a blood-like syrup, again, to make it look real when they were shot or injured or damaged. But in terms of quote unquote killing or disabling a robot, it should be entirely different than killing a human, So for example, a headshot or a heart shot, right? A chest shot would kill a human. The same should not be the case for a host. So it's very strange. It seemed like the rules they were trying to apply the same rules, but a host should not die the same way, And also, there was a scene in the last episode where Aaron Paul was fighting Clementine.
Clementine, yeah, absolutely.
Clementine Pennyfeather. Okay, this is where you and I are so good on this podcast. What are the rules for Clementine as a host? Does she have equal strength as any other host? Or because she's a lithe woman type host, does she have less strength? Because if she's just as strong, she should absolutely be destroying Aaron Paul.
Absolutely.
Or did they say, well, no, Clementine, we're going to give a weaker exostructure, and this is going to be weaker, and this is going to be weaker, and her frame is going to be smaller, and she's just not as strong of a robot, right? So Aaron Paul can beat her up. Aaron Paul, who we love, right? In Breaking Bad, is by no definition a huge, imposing guy. He should not be winning like a lot of all-out physical fights, right? Especially with a robot. Especially when he's injured. Although now he is a robot. The whole thing is just kind of there. It's, Christopher Nolan, who we love as a filmmaker, also does things where he kind of like writes his own rules in movies when it suits him for the plot. His brother seems to have done the same thing. Like when the rules apply or help the storyline, they applied. When they don't help the storyline, then they're kind of like ignored, right? So is Angela strong or not strong? Is Caleb, who's a robot, strong or not strong? Right?
Yeah, I don't know. These are all the little things that could have been addressed in earlier seasons very easily, in the sense that you could give a throwaway line.
Yeah.
You could have given a throwaway line here or there. I mean, we saw the manufacturing facilities underneath Westworld.
Yeah.
We saw the robots being made, or these hosts being made. There's so many opportunities that they had to say, hey, look, I can't even think of one right now, but there's so many things where if you had, it wouldn't have taken more than 10 minutes of dialogue in total over 3-4 seasons to explain these rules. I don't get it. Why is it that they are so good at manufacturing now, we can't tell the difference between humans and robots? And I still refuse to believe that they wouldn't do something to differentiate a human from a robot. Even if it's something simple, Michael Keaton, he did that movie Multiplicity. Yeah. And in that movie, they put tattooed dots behind the ear, if I remember correctly, or something like that. Maybe it was another movie that had that. Yeah. But it's just something simple to say, hey, look, if this person has a QR code tattooed on the back of their ear, and this is hardwired into every printer so you can't circumvent it, that person is a robot. It's a host.
I mean, I want to love this show so much like I did the first 2 seasons, but it seemed to just be all over the place in terms of the rules. Like, I love Ed Harris. Okay, so Ed Harris, the human, has been captured. Ed Harris, the host, right, is now essentially rebelling a little bit against Tessa Thompson,
he's
Charlotte.
Infected.
Right? Like, he's infected, and now he is like Ed Harris, the human, right?
Mm-hmm. But he's in Ed Harris, the robot's body. And then you look at him, I mean, he's obviously a much older man, but he's going toe-to-toe with this Tessa Thompson robot. Yeah, it's a little off in terms of someone who's watching from far away and not paying too much attention, this is fine. But the moment you put a little bit of nuance and a little bit of forethought into this, then you're just like, okay, well, why is this even a thing still?
I mean, so the original Dolores, right? So there's basically 2 Doloreses. There's Dolores, who doesn't realize that she's Dolores living in this world. And then there's Charlotte Dolores, right?
Halloran. She's Charlotte Hale and Dolores.
Yeah. So she's basically manipulating everything. It seems like the whole point of this show is whether or not the hosts will live in their own virtual world, safe and human free, right?
Exactly. My understanding was that was the whole point, was that if you get chosen to transcend, you get to transcend and go into this virtual world, which is where we saw that was created at the end of season 2, or that was opened at the end of season 2, where we saw Maeve's child go, and
so
Maeve's
it's basically the metaverse. It's basically the metaverse, right?
Yeah.
So like essentially that everyone has a copy of themselves living in the metaverse, which is for all intents and purposes like this heaven where they don't age or change and they just live their best lives. And I've got my metaverse, you've got your metaverse, and it's all housed on this big server at the Hoover Dam that someone is responsible for just maintaining and paying the electric bill for, right?
Sure. That's just fine, but then the question becomes why? Yeah, if you're already living in the world where you've got these humans that are under your control, what is the difference, or what is the purpose in doing that?
I guess overall, unlike Better Call Saul, where I thought it came to a very eloquent ending, for Westworld, I was happy that I saw the end. If there's a season 5, I will watch it, but I'm not really so...
It has to be super compelling to watch again, because I don't understand where the thread goes from here.
Yeah.
Again, I can't help but feel that the writers have kind of written themselves into a corner, and without doing some kind of in-universe reboot, how do you bring everyone back, and for what purpose do you bring them back? Because as far as we're concerned, all the robots have now achieved consciousness, right? Or all the hosts have. So if you've achieved consciousness, then what more do you where's the next struggle in a world that you own and create?
What do you think of Aaron Paul's casting in this show? I mean, he is... Okay, Anthony Hopkins was in like season 1, right? He's well known. Ed Harris is very well known. I thought he played Man in Black perfectly. Tessa Thompson, like very popular. She played Charlotte very good. What do you think of Aaron Paul, who's like more than anyone is associated with one single character, right?
Yeah.
Tough to put him in this show, right?
Yeah, but it was his, and this is not a dig at Aaron Paul, but his role was so innocuous that it didn't, I didn't look at him and immediately think of Jesse Pinkman. I did when I first saw him, but then moving on, I was like, that's fine. That's absolutely fine. He's playing this guy who's the adoptive father of this girl. That's it. That's fine. Move on.
Yeah.
Season 3, I think, was such a mixed bag. I think that's why it's hard to justify why he was in the show, and why they used him, and what the plot of season 3 was. I think season 3 was really when it started to go off the rails.
Yeah, I agree. Season 3, I could kind of get behind a little bit because it was leading to kind of a bigger picture,
Yeah, but it was, and as you rightly pointed out, it was the lead to humans versus hosts, war. And then season 4 skirts that entire war by doing a flash forward, and they justify that skirt by saying, oh, we've invented a disease / infection / virus that can be transmitted by flies, and the moment you get infected by it, we're under your control now. And that's fine, don't get me wrong, but it was so brief. Like, there was no resistance, there was no fighting shown. I think that's where it could have been. The show could have transcended a little bit more of this philosophical question into more of an action show.
I agree. I guess I don't have anything else to say on Westworld. I'm just going to drone on and on about the same point, but it was really a show. The first 2 seasons, I raved about it. It was probably my favorite show, and I would have said that it was going to at one point be the best show I've ever watched. And it's really, over the past 2 years, it just kind of went downhill a little bit. And I have to say, if I'm drawing a parallel, I really hope for all mankind does not follow a similar fate, where we've watched, 3 amazing seasons now? I really hope that season 4 isn't just this clunker and suddenly we're like, I don't even care about
I hope so too. You've raised a good point that I didn't want to think about, but I hope they don't do anything to kind of muck it up.
Okay, Pete. Okay, listeners.
If you've got any recommendations for any shows that we should be watching or any shows that we should be looking forward to in the rest of this year, reach out to us. aloha@filmsandstuffpodcast.com or tweet at us at F&S Podcast.
We want to hear from you.
We need to hear from you.
Thanks, everyone, for listening to us this week. We'll be back next week. More episodes shall drop.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Films and Stuff. If you haven't already, please subscribe and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever podcasts are downloaded. Films and Stuff. There is no substitute.